So what are the benefits of biodiversity in terms of the land itself?
Biodiversity is a good indicator of a stable and resilient system. So also in the face of something like climate change, might not be so severe or so quick to happen.
Hello and good morning and welcome to Hard Talk. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience out there?
Sure. Thank you. Hi. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Brilliant.
I'm Dr. Juan Swanepoel, and I just recently passed my Ph.D. with minor corrections in conservation biology at University of Cape Town in South Africa.
Well, welcome, Mr. Cape Town, Doctor.
Not quite official, but almost, yes.
Well, we're almost there. So we can officially call you a doctor because you've worked really hard. PhDs are not a walk in the park. We all know that. So respect to you and welcome today. Could you please introduce your research? What is it about?
So my research looked at some biological aspects of raised earth mounds in South Africa called heuveltjies. The word heuveltjies means small hills in Afrikaans. So nearly all former work on this topic has been on the origins of heuveltjies, which has either been, or the two remaining debates are whether they are termite produced or the product of wind-blown sediment accretion. And what my work tried to do is just compile all the biological data of these heuveltjies and assess the impact they have and the value they bring to the landscape ecology and the processes. Okay.
I mean, to me, that's interesting. I guess the reason why I've asked you to introduce it is because I've got questions. For example, why choose the Afrikaans world? I mean, we are global now. So I'm trying to understand, is it homage to your home country or your origins? What was the thought process behind that?
So heuveltjies, yes, it is. Now, I am South African, and Afrikaans is one of my home languages. So, and it's a term, if you've ever been to South Africa, we have 11 official languages. So we use and intermingle them quite a lot, especially Afrikaans and English. But heuveltjies themselves are also only found in the Western Cape province of South Africa. So it is very much South African.
Okay, brilliant. So I think when I've been to Africa, I've seen the little hills. They're like red, it's like red dust, isn't it? And it's like a little hill. So I've seen them, hence why I'm asking. And those little termites, boy, do they bite. I've experienced, being bitten as well. And I don't like it. So
no one would like it, no.
So I do know in terms of what they look like. What interested you and how does that actually help the wider community out there in terms of your research?
So the heuveltjies specifically do not look like those big raised, I would say, towers that you see in a lot of photos. This particular species forms 4 different types of mounds. That being one of them, but the heuveltjies specifically are very slightly raised. When you look at them from a flat point of view, they just slightly raise, about maximum 2 meters in height. And they form a distinct pattern and distribution. So they have a hexagonal, I don't know which is right.
Yeah, the hex.
Yeah.
People, the hex? Yeah, that one, yeah.
Yeah, so they form that distinct pattern when they are optimally spaced away from each other. And that is a good indicator of the quality of the landscape, but also we found a lot of previous work has also mentioned that there are distinct vegetation types on these mounds that do not occur in the rest of the landscape. And similarly, people have hinted at different animal associations. So I started looking at the distinct communities on these heuveltjies compared to the rest of the landscape, and found that they contribute quite significantly to biodiversity, which in South Africa is a diversity, and natural tourism is one of our pillars of economy. So it's a long way, but it has a really important impact on South Africa as a whole, especially in the Western Cape.
Okay, brilliant. So in terms of biodiversity, what is biodiversity? I mean, I'm not really scientific like that.
We have several types of biodiversity, but I'm not going to go into the detail about them. I'll just, what's important that's need to know. So we have richness, which is the number of different type of species
Mm-hmm.
So we could have species A, B, C, D, E.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a richness of 5, but biodiversity looks at how this diversity is spread. So you could have 10A and 1 of each of the rest.
Yeah.
So that's a low biodiversity. But if you had 2 of each, that's a very high biodiversity score, which we calculate using several different types of diversity indices.
Okay, so what are the benefits of biodiversity in terms of the land itself?
Biodiversity is a good indicator of a stable and resilient system. So
Okay.
also in the face of something like climate change, that's especially affecting the Karoo, which is a very arid part of South Africa where these hivukis occur, having a high biodiversity being a sign of a stable environment indicates to us that there might be some resilience and ability to overcome climate change effects.
Oh, brilliant.
Not necessarily overcome, but to prevent the harshness.
Minimize a little bit, balance.
Yeah, the impact might not be so severe or so quick to happen.
Brilliant. So you are giving back in terms of the community in that way by trying to find means to slow the process when it comes to global warming in that sense. Is that what you're saying?
In a small amount, yes. Yes.
Well, it's baby steps with everything. We can't really, do a marathon. We have to do baby steps because we need to find out what the root cause is and what we can do. So going back to the land itself, I guess based on my reading and my understanding of Cape Town, and I'm not looking at specifically Western Cape, I know that we've got a lot of agriculture, some of the clementines that go globally, the oranges and stuff like that. So is that the other aspects of your research to look at the land itself in terms of how we can reproduce in terms of the GDP in South Africa, would you say?
That falls more towards the agricultural aspect, which has been looked at on these hivukis. I think I only remember one paper that actually touched on it.
Yeah.
Where
so
they
that's
did...
a research gap for you.
It might be. But there was one paper, because Cape Town and the Western Cape is quite famous for its wine. They did experiments and studies in growing, because these mounds are also more rich in nutrients and have a better water soil ratio property going on there. They tend to allow for better growth. So they did try growing vineyards on hivukis compared to vineyards grown in regular soil. And although they did have a better yield and better growth on hivukis, people who know wine would know the taste of the grapes, the quality of the grapes was different. There were different aspects that they didn't necessarily like off the hivukis, which they prefer from normal soil, but they got a better yield on the hivukis.
So now I'm thinking in terms of poverty. So therefore, we've got an opportunity to explore here to plant more vegetation. It might not taste the same, but people will have food. Is that something that's being trialed at the moment, or am I being far-fetched and running?
No. There have been other studies in other parts of Africa where they've taken the soil off of these mounds and what's called Frass, which is basically termite droppings, collected it and also incorporated it into the regular soil and have improved yields and quality and vegetative growth.
Yeah.
But industrializing hivukis as such would be very difficult because they range in size from 2.5 meters diameter to 30 meters diameter. And it's really impractical, the locations where they are. But we're also trying to conserve them because of the ecological benefit they have. And from my study, I did gather that a lot of them have been destroyed, or either for agricultural use or for urban development, because I had to look for sites that were appropriately sized. And you could find sites of hivukis, but small sites that weren't eligible for my study. So that does show that their distribution is decreasing because of human development in various.
I guess with human development, if we look at it really, we do tend to destroy a lot of things for our own gain, economically. But looking at South Africa at the moment, there's high levels of unemployment. So I can see why people will go out there to grow their own vegetation to sell, because employment, you know, it's quite difficult to get a job in that sense. I know this is away from your research, but I'm just giving a bit of context.
Very much. Actually, I've been to several conferences over the past years, especially when I just started my PhD, where people from my field, ecology, general ecology, are really trying to integrate with social sciences. And especially in the Karoo, there's been a big step forward in terms of that. I think once you become an actual researcher, you get to incorporate people from different fields and collaborate as you want. But in a PhD, you're rather limited.
Yeah. So in terms of, we're looking at you now and we know that you've got a few corrections to make. What are your thoughts? What are you planning to do in the next year or two? Is it postdoc, or are you thinking, I want to go into industry? Where are you mentally? I'm
open to a postdoc.
Yeah.
I would like to move away from academia for a bit, because it's been one straight path for me for the past more than 10 years.
Right.
I don't know. I would love to work in biodiversity study, and my background is botany and zoology, and I'd like to work more. I've been working more towards the botany side.
Okay.
And I would like some more experience in the zoology. And I do love research. I do love research. So we'll see where the opportunities arise.
Okay, so I know a little bit about you, so I'm just going to share it with everybody. You work with cheetahs, which really excites me. I'm terrified of animals, by the way, but I'm so excited that you actually get to see them. So is that linking back to your work then, in terms of with the cheetahs and what you've been learning thus far?
I was quite lucky to find this opportunity. It's a short internship where you get to work in cheetah conservation. And any postgrad would know, starting to look for work, that you're overqualified and underexperienced often. I was looking for any opportunity to get some experience, and this happened upon my way. It's sort of like a halfway house between wherever these cats come from and being released back into the wild. So most of them are already wild. They're bred on reserves or farms, but because the cheetah population in Africa, or in South Africa, is already vulnerable, the genetic diversity is very low. So you have a lot of inbreeding on reserves where they do occur, and we try and manage that by moving them among reserves. So the place I'm interning now at the moment is sort of a halfway house. We get the cats in, we test them for genetic defects, genetic relatability to other cats on the system, and then they are placed out according to that, which is great. Before this, I didn't know much about cheetahs, I'll be honest. I knew they existed, I'd seen them growing up in Africa. But I've also been exposed to more international work on cheetahs, and in North Africa, it's a much bigger deal than it is here. We have a viable population, whereas in North Africa, I understand there isn't much conservation going towards it. So we basically just feed the cats appropriately. They get fed wild game meat as they would catch in the wild. They are fed according to a strict schedule, which is also according to how they would eat naturally. And we do exercise them. They've got a huge running enclosure with a small natural lure. It's all natural, where they get their exercise. And they get loads of enrichment, natural types of enrichments that we can think of. And so that's basically what we do until we find an appropriate place to release them.
No, that is amazing. I guess in terms of, I'm just going to do a quick disclaimer. For anybody that loves animals, back in Africa, we grow up with these animals and we see them. We understand that they, you know, from a global perspective, that they may be going extinct, but in terms of technology, we're not, you know, in line with the world from a Western world. So therefore, we're still catching up. And like you've just explained right now, to say, we put measures in place to ensure that we feed them at the right time, that they're well looked after, they can run around, there's massive space. So please don't leave anything that's mean. And if you do, that's okay, brilliant. It adds on to our research anyway. That's what we get paid to do. So back to us. I remember I used to wake up and fight with the monkeys to get the mangoes. I'd throw an old mango, they'd throw a fresh mango. That was my life. So until I learned, oh no, those are monkeys. It's not a baboon. But to me, it was all in one. It all looked the same.
Yeah.
So going back to your research, really, in terms of your methodology, why did you choose the current methodology that you've used?
Exactly what you've just explained, to try and get up to global standards.
I see what you did there.
But really, that's exactly what we're doing. I was very lucky enough to study at UCT, and they are very well equipped and on par with global standards in terms of research. And the way forward for a lot of ecological work right now is remote sensing, because it allows us to see places and examine things we normally wouldn't because of just getting there. So I did a combination of remote sensing work, which allowed me to survey, I think, about 80 sites, which in terms of travel in South Africa is quite a lot during a PhD if you had to go physically visit them and scale mountains and go into very warm climates. So I did that for remote sensing, and then I chose 10 representative samples out of that, which I had to go visit in person. So it's a combination of practical field work and computer desktop remote sensing work, which is comparable to that of anywhere else in the world, I would say.
Yeah. So did you have a team that you worked with, or were you just solo on this mission in terms of going to sightsee the 10 locations that you chose?
There's one site in particular that was very close to Cape Town. So it was very easy to access and it was very safe. No problem there. But when I did the bigger trips, I think I always had at least one assistant with me, either a friend or someone from the department or an intern from a former internship I did, who I'm still connected with, who would allow me to use interns from time to time.
Okay, brilliant. So now I'm thinking, I've heard that Wits University is really good when it comes to stuff that you're doing. Why didn't you go to Wits University? And why not think about Wits to go and do your postdoc? I've heard so much about it.
Well, I've heard a lot about Wits, and I have many good friends there as well. I guess I've been my undergrad, we do an undergrad and an honors, which I believe in Europe is combined into one. But I did my undergrad at one university, UNISA, and then my honors and masters at the University of the Free State. And then from there, I never planned on doing a PhD. But I started an internship, which one of the projects I was working on during the internship led to the development of my PhD. And my mentors there had contacts with UCT and had someone in mind that I could work with there. And that's how I ended up at UCT. Like I said, I'm not opposed to a postdoc, but I'm a little tired of academia right now, maybe in future.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, like I said, I've just heard, I've never been there, no idea, but everybody seems to.
Been there myself either, but I've heard many good things, and I know a lot of good people from there.
Yeah, brilliant. So going back to your research, I guess the thing that really captured my mind is a new word that I've learned, and it's called Frass. Could you please take us through that? Because I find that really fascinating. I've never heard of, because I'm thinking grass, Frass, grass. But yeah, could you take us through that? Because that is an element of your research, isn't it? It does link in.
It's one of the biggest parts. So I'll be honest, I only learned about Frass when I started the internship as well. And if I'm not mistaken, it's any kind of pelleted insect poo or feces. And termite Frass especially is very rich. Most poo is very rich in nutrients, and it's very sandy and granular. We walk over it when we go out into the field. You wouldn't know the difference between it and sand. The only difference is when you pick it up, it's normally darkish black, gray, and it's very, very light. So if you had a handful of sand and you blew, the Frass would be the first thing to blow away, and then the sand. Very nutrient rich, and it allows for the soil to develop unique water properties as well. So that's why a lot of plants grow there instead of in the rest of the landscape, because there's a competitive interaction going on for these nutrients and these water properties. So some are better adapted to grow off of these hierarchies, whereas some are better adapted to grow on, which was actually one of my experiments. We tried, but there were several variables that made it really difficult to ascertain anything significant, but it was a really interesting thing that I hope to develop maybe someday.
Okay. You know, from what you're saying, I'm now thinking, okay, we've got Botswana, which is really hot. There's a lot of dry land, you know, the desert, etc. Is it possible? I'm now thinking in my head, because, you know, there's a lot of poverty in Africa,
Yeah.
you know, and some of it is due to the fact that we don't have enough equipment to drill boreholes to get the water, you know, for us to then go through irrigation and all that sort. And I'm now thinking, if we were to take this methodology in terms of Frass and we went to a dry land and we put there, could we possibly plant like cabbages? You know, people can eat cabbage, isn't it?
That's a good question. I do recall a paper. It was also somewhere in North Africa where they introduced termites to a site that had no termites. And it did improve the soil water properties. I forget why it wasn't significant. I think they just had too short a time frame to do the study in to see anything, but they did have improved tomato yields in a small patch. I do recall that.
Yeah.
Something like that, though, introducing species is a very, very touchy subject. We don't do that.
Yes, I know.
To look into the mechanisms of that and fertilize it, because it's essentially termite fertilizers and also the fact that they burrow and dig tunnels.
Because it is organic. Because I'm just thinking, okay, if we take Limpopo, for example, you know, around that area, because you've got the water already. If they were to follow through, you would know where the soil is rich in water and where it isn't, because you'll be able to follow the footsteps, isn't it? Because when they build the stuff, it's a wave and you can follow it through, whether 5 meters or 10 meters, you can follow it through. So therefore, in terms of our immediate problem, which is we don't have a lot of, you know, food, it's a high cost, people can't afford those in the villages, they will have an option. I know we've got a lot of farms around that area, but it does help the immediate indigenous people in those areas that they can get some food from a scientific perspective, I guess. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, you could also say you don't have to limit it to hierarchies. There are several different termite species in South Africa, and they're all over. And I mean, studies have been done. They do the same thing in other species. They just don't make hierarchies. They make different types of nests. So you could definitely implement that. I just don't know how. That's the next
investors
question.
Out there, we've got an idea. Call us.
Perfect.
Let's make some money. But no, that's really interesting. I guess what I wanted to ask is, if you were to look back to when you started your PhD, what would you advise yourself?
For me personally, would be not to compare yourself to others. Everyone works at a different pace. And also to find balance very early on. Because if you don't, it'll catch up to you later on when you reach the point of starting a master's or a PhD, and you'll lose the passion, and it's very difficult to get that back. So I would say balance is the most important. And don't be ashamed. All of us struggle. We all struggle. All academics struggle with something.
I'm an addict to coffee. That's my struggle. Click, click. We'll drink to that. I guess the last thing is, you know, I've spoken to a few people now. I mean, the videos aren't up yet. But when it comes to self-funding and getting, you know, assistance from the university, what are your thoughts as the last question? Would you say it's better to self-fund or to get a scholarship?
That's also a case-to-case situation. In South Africa, for instance, I am very lucky enough for my PhD and for a part of my master's to have received scholarships. It's impossible, I would say almost nearly impossible to self-fund, but I know people who do it. If you can structure and plan accordingly, and don't enroll for a full-time PhD if you're self-funding. Never do that. I did my undergrad was self-funded, and I did work during that. Even that was difficult.
Yeah.
But I think it's simpler, it's easier, it can be done to get, at least to get your degree, to get started.
Yeah.
The problem though is getting funding, because the applications are quite tedious and they're not as advertised as they should be. They're not marketed well. It's very difficult to find out where they are. I was very lucky. I'm very lucky in many aspects, but especially the internships and the people I worked with already had funding available that they were offering.
Yeah.
So it's also about who you know, academia. So networking, although I hate it, I'm very bad at it. Networking is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's about all I can say. And I guess I've met some students from Europe and from the States. It's a different situation. They're all together. So I can't speak to a global audience. But in South Africa, for example, that's what I would say. Network and ask around.
And then disclaimer to South Africa. We understand that there are ethnical imbalances, but that's not what we're speaking about here. We're only speaking of what's available. You do need to network. Even in Europe, you need to network. So if you don't open your mouth, you don't get fed. Okay, you need to hustle. You need to work. So back to us. I would like to say thank you very much. You know, you don't know what we might get back. So hence why I'm saying what I'm saying. Wits University has opportunities, but some of them, they never make it online. So I've heard, and people have had to network.
Interject quickly. Also, join as many academic networks as you can, because they advertise them all the time. I receive emails daily.
Yeah. And the other thing is, this was through networking, our conversation, isn't it? I saw you, I sent a message, it's through networking. We've never met each other. This is our first time. And I feel like I know you, like, you know, since, you know, and I'm excited about the cheetahs and I can't wait to come and, you know, have sushi with you, literally. Yeah, so thank you so much for your time today. It's been interesting and I've learned so much about, you know, termites. So thank you so much. Thank you.